The spring of 1985 held a dark secret within the bustling archipelago of Japan. It was a time when the hustle and bustle of daily life, the neon glow of urban centers, and the quiet routines of suburban existence were about to be brutally disrupted. Our story begins not with a grand revelation, but with the mundane weariness of a worker. It was April 30th. The cherry blossoms, symbols of ephemeral beauty, had begun to fall gently, carpeting the sidewalks in a fleeting farewell. A truck driver whose name has been lost to the annals of time finished his long and arduous shift. The burden of his work weighed heavily on his shoulders, every muscle aching from hours spent navigating Japan's intricate road network. His thoughts drifted to the simple pleasure of a cold, refreshing drink. The ubiquitous vending machines that dotted the landscape offered the promise of quick refreshment, a brief respite before the journey home. He pulled his vehicle to the side of the road in Fukuyama, a city known for its rich history and, on this day, the starting point of an inexplicable tragedy. The driver approached the metal structure, its glass facade displaying an array of colorful bottles. His eyes scanned the options, finally settling on Aronomin C, a popular energy drink promising a boost of vitality. But fate, in its cruelest form, had intervened. As he reached into the dispensing tray, he found a bottle already there. A nameless benefactor, he thought, had left an extra. Perhaps an act of kindness, a moment of shared humanity in the relentless pace of modern life. He opened the bottle and, with a sigh of gratitude, drank it. The expected refreshment never came. Instead, a searing fire erupted in his throat, an agonizing pain that spread with terrifying speed. Nausea, a relentless wave, washed over him, and his body, once a vessel of strength, betrayed him. He collapsed onto the hard asphalt, his world dissolving into a vortex of pain and confusion. Passers-by, witnessing his distress, rushed to his aid. An ambulance arrived, its siren wailing a mournful cry, tearing through the afternoon calm. He was taken to a nearby hospital, where a horrifying discovery awaited. Doctors, their faces etched with concern, identified the cause: parathion. Parathion, a name that would soon be whispered with dread, was a common agricultural chemical in Japan at that time. Its effectiveness as a herbicide was well established, but its toxicity to humans was equally profound. Consumption led to a series of horrors: severe nausea, severe inflammation of the throat, internal chemical burns that ravaged delicate tissues, and ultimately, if the dose was sufficient, death. Its devastating potential was so widely recognized that more than 70 countries had banned its use. In 1985 in Japan, parathion was used not only in vast agricultural lands, but also in small gardens and even in home yards. This easy access to a deadly chemical added to the horror of the crimes that were to come. The medical team fought valiantly, but their efforts were in vain. In 1985, the medical world had not yet found an effective antidote for this dangerous poison. The truck driver lingered between life and death for a month. On May 30th, his struggle ended. He became the first victim, an unwitting participant in a drama that would soon grip the entire nation in fear. His death sent shockwaves through the Fukuyama community, leaving residents with a disturbing sense of insecurity and vulnerability. The initial investigation was shrouded in uncertainty. Law enforcement, their minds grappling with the inexplicable, considered various possibilities. Could it have been an accident? A tragic occupational hazard? The driver's work, after all, brought him into contact with various substances. His cargo records were meticulously examined, scrutinized for any trace of parathion or related chemicals. But the records offered no answers, no comforting explanation. Investigators interviewed the driver's colleagues, family members, and anyone who might have relevant information, but every lead turned into a dead end. The evidence pointed to a more sinister direction. The drink itself had been deliberately contaminated. The driver, in his final act of trust, had consumed a deadly concoction. But who would commit such a heinous crime? And why? The investigation stalled, hampered by the lack of any tangible leads. Was it a targeted attack or a random act of malice? These questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered and unsettling. In the context of that time, the idea of deliberate poisoning, although shocking, was not entirely unthinkable. Parathion, horrifyingly, was readily available. There were no strict regulations, no requirements for identification or prescriptions governing its purchase. It was a silent killer lurking in plain sight. In 1984 alone, the year before the first tragedy, Parathion was implicated in more than 1,400 suicides in Japan. The accessibility of the poison cast a long shadow over the investigation, blurring the lines between self-destruction and homicidal intent. The authorities realized that they were dealing with a case unlike any they had ever encountered, a crime that defied conventional understanding of criminal motivation and methods. The case threatened to fade into obscurity, another unsolved mystery lost in the labyrinth of urban life. But fate, it seemed, was not yet finished with its grim tableau. On September 5th, a second victim fell prey to the same deadly poison, the same brand of energy drink. These chilling similarities could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. 6 days later, a third person died, and then 2 weeks after that, a fourth. The police began to work under the hypothesis that the murders were committed by the same person. A horrifying realization dawned on the investigators, a chilling truth that sent shivers down their spines. This was not a series of isolated incidents. This was the work of a serial killer, a phantom figure moving through the shadows, leaving a trail of poisoned drinks and shattered lives in his wake. Vending machines, once symbols of convenience and accessibility, had become instruments of death. News of the murders spread rapidly, creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion throughout the country. People became afraid to buy drinks from vending machines, and sales plummeted. The killer, it seemed, was a master of deception, a ghost in the machine. He left behind no fingerprints, no trace of DNA, no tangible evidence that could lead to his identification. He chose his targets carefully, selecting vending machines strategically located away from the watchful eyes of CCTV cameras. His methods were as efficient as they were terrifying. The killer operated with an astonishing level of precision and patience, meticulously planning every step to avoid detection. He knew how vending machines worked, how to manipulate the products, and how to disappear without a trace. The victims, in their unwitting participation, were aided by a confluence of factors. Oronomin C, in an attempt to capture the youth market, had launched a "buy one get one free" campaign. This promotion, intended to boost sales, inadvertently created a deadly opportunity. Many consumers wanting only a single drink would leave the second complimentary bottle near the vending machine, a silent offering to the next passerby. This practice, born of a sense of shared economy and perhaps a touch of Japanese courtesy, was so common that the sight of a stray bottle rarely aroused suspicion. The killer exploited this cultural norm, turning an act of casual generosity into a vector of death. The killer's motive for taking advantage of this promotion may have been for several reasons, such as to spread the poison to more people or to avoid suspicion. The killer's method was tragically effective. By the end of that year, the death toll had reached 12. 35 others survived, but their bodies and minds were scarred, their lives forever altered by the encounter with the poison. The nation reeled, gripped by a fear that lurked in the most mundane of places. The impact of the murders was immense, affecting not only the victims and their families, but also Japanese society as a whole. Trust in public institutions was eroded, and a widespread sense of insecurity emerged. The investigation, now a desperate race against time, faced almost insurmountable challenges. The killer operated across a vast geographical area, traversing western and central Japan, and even venturing into the sprawling metropolis of Tokyo. This nomadic pattern made it nearly impossible to establish a clear profile, to discern a pattern that might lead to his capture. The lack of concrete evidence further compounded the frustration, leaving investigators grasping at shadows. An investigative team comprising the best of Japan's law enforcement was deployed for this case, but they too were baffled by the lack of leads. The motive behind the killings remained an enigma. Speculation ran rampant, theories swirling like autumn leaves in a sudden gust of wind. One hypothesis, fueled by a similar incident in the past, centered on the possibility of extortion. In 1984, a mysterious group calling itself the Mystery Man with 21 Faces had terrorized the food industry, threatening to contaminate products unless their financial demands were met. Some believed that the vending machine killer was a copycat, emulating the tactics of this earlier group. The motive for extortion in the case of the Mystery Man with 21 Faces was to obtain money from food companies. But this theory quickly lost its luster. Otsuka Pharmaceutical, the manufacturer of Oranomin C, received no threatening letters, no demands for money. Moreover, the killer's choice of beverages expanded, including other brands such as Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola. The focus on a single company, a hallmark of an extortion scheme, was absent. The vending machine killer did not appear to be motivated by financial gain, which further perplexed the authorities. Dr. Hiroyuki Kobayashi, a respected professor of criminal sociology at a university in Tokyo, offered a darker, more disturbing interpretation. He suggested that the killer's actions were rooted in the unique pressures of Japanese society. It is not uncommon, he theorized, for Japanese who live under tremendous pressure, both at work and in crowded communities, to release their frustrations by harming someone else. The person responsible may even wait around to see who buys the poisoned drink. He or she may find this as a kind of exhilarating release from the tensions of life in Japan. Dr. Kobayashi's theory of releasing tension and social pressure resonated with the public, who were grappling with the implications of these crimes. This theory, while chillingly plausible, provided little in the way of practical assistance. It offered a glimpse into the potential mindset of the killer, but it did not bring the investigators any closer to identifying him, to bringing him to justice. The killer remained an elusive phantom, a dark reflection of the societal pressures described by Dr. Kobayashi. The authorities faced the daunting task of capturing someone who seemed to be motivated by irrational and elusive forces. Desperate and running out of options, the authorities turned to the public for help. On September 27th, a nationwide campaign was launched, a plea for vigilance in the face of an unseen enemy. Posters were placed in public spaces, and leaflets were distributed to every corner of the country. The message was clear, concise, and urgent. Avoid suspicious free drinks, inspect the capsules on your beverages before consumption, report any tampered bottles. The public campaign was unprecedented in its scale and intensity, reflecting the desperation of the authorities. Vending machine owners were instructed to conduct thorough inspections of their machines, looking for any signs of tampering, any anomalies that might indicate the presence of poisoned drinks. Chemical retailers were urged to exercise greater scrutiny over their customers, to be alert for any unusual purchases, any patterns of behavior that might raise red flags. These measures were unprecedented and disrupted the normal operations of businesses throughout Japan. The effectiveness of this campaign remains a subject of debate. The number of victims continued to rise, even after its implementation. The killer, it seemed, was undeterred, continuing his deadly game with impunity. But then, as abruptly as it had begun, the killing spree stopped. The sudden cessation of the killings was as puzzling as their commencement, leaving authorities and the public to speculate about the reasons behind it. On November 17th, the poisoning stopped. The last victim was a 17-year-old girl, the only female to die in this series of crimes. Her death marked the end of the killer's reign of terror, but it also deepened the mystery surrounding his motives. The young girl's death triggered a wave of grief and outrage, but it also raised disturbing questions about the killer's intentions. The killer's sudden cessation of violence remains a subject of intense speculation. Was it a calculated decision, a change of heart, or simply a matter of circumstance? The death of the young girl, the sole female victim, raised a disturbing question. Did the killer adhere to some twisted moral code, a self-imposed boundary against harming women? This theory, however, remains nothing more than conjecture, a desperate attempt to impose some semblance of logic on an act of utter irrationality. The killer's motives remain a mystery to this day. The vending machine killer was never apprehended. He vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a legacy of fear, grief, and unanswered questions. The case remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in Japanese history, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most orderly and peaceful societies. The memory of the victims, the fear that gripped the nation, and the elusive nature of the perpetrator continue to haunt the collective consciousness, a grim testament to the fragility of life and the enduring power of the unknown. The case continues to inspire books, films, and other works of art, serving as a lasting reminder of the incomprehensible crimes that occurred in Japan during that fateful spring of 1985. The evening of February 17, 1997, began as a typical night out for 21-year-old Patrick McNeil. He joined friends at the Dapper Dog Bar, a Manhattan establishment known for its lively atmosphere. As the hours passed, it became evident that Patrick had consumed a significant amount of alcohol. His condition deteriorated to the point where he became ill in the bar's restroom. Shortly thereafter, Patrick departed the Dapper Dog Bar. Witnesses reported seeing him turn left onto 90th Street, a route that would take him in the direction of the East River. This sighting marked the last time anyone would see Patrick McNeil alive. Following this night, Patrick seemingly vanished. Law enforcement agencies initiated a comprehensive search, but their efforts yielded no tangible leads or clues regarding his disappearance. The mystery surrounding his whereabouts persisted for nearly 2 months. Then on April 7, 1997, the grim discovery was made. Patrick's body was recovered from the waters of the East River. 50 days had elapsed since he was last seen. The recovery and initial examination of the body fell under the purview of NYPD Special Investigation Division Duty Sergeant Kevin Gannon. Gannon was a seasoned detective, a veteran of the force with years of experience. He had encountered a wide spectrum of crime scenes and unusual circumstances throughout his career. However, the details surrounding Patrick McNeil's death struck him as profoundly unsettling. The more he delved into the specifics of the case, the more anomalies he uncovered, leading him to suspect that the official narrative might be incomplete or even incorrect. One of the most perplexing aspects of the case, in Gannon's view, was the condition of Patrick's body. Gannon's experience suggested that after 50 days in the East River, a body would exhibit a significantly greater degree of decomposition. Yet, Patrick's remains did not align with this expectation. Furthermore, Gannon observed burn marks on the body, an unusual finding that hinted at the possibility that Patrick had been physically restrained at some point prior to his death. These details, considered together, raised serious questions about the circumstances leading to Patrick's demise. Gannon felt instinctively that something was amiss. Despite Gannon's reservations and his growing unease, the official investigation, hampered by a lack of concrete evidence pointing to foul play, ultimately concluded that Patrick McNeil's death was accidental. This ruling, however, did little to quell Gannon's disquiet. The inconsistencies he had noted continued to trouble him, lingering in his thoughts for the next year. Then in February of 1998, Gannon encountered another case that reignited his suspicions and provided a chilling sense of déjà vu. On February 13, 1998, another body was discovered in the same stretch of the East River where Patrick McNeil's body had been found. The deceased was identified as 22-year-old Lawrence R. Andrews. Andrews had disappeared on New Year's Eve after celebrating the arrival of the new year with friends in the bustling environment of Times Square. As Gannon began to investigate the Andrews case, he was struck by the unsettling parallels between it and the McNeil case. The two bodies had been found within close proximity to each other, a geographical coincidence that Gannon found difficult to dismiss. Both victims were young, Caucasian males, and both were described as being on promising career paths, suggesting a bright future ahead of them. Both men had vanished without a trace from one of the most densely populated and heavily trafficked cities in the world, a vanishing act that defied easy explanation. Perhaps most significantly, Gannon observed the same anomalies in Andrew's case that he had noted in McNeil's. The condition of the body was inconsistent with the expected level of decomposition, given the length of time it had been in the water. And as in McNeil's case, there were indications of possible restraint, evidenced by burn marks on the body. These similarities were too striking to ignore, prompting Gannon to consider the possibility that these two deaths were not isolated incidents, but rather connected in some way. The Andrews case prompted Gannon to broaden his investigation, to look beyond the immediate circumstances of these two deaths, and consider whether there might be other similar cases across the United States. He enlisted the assistance of fellow detective Anthony Darte, whose investigative skills he trusted, and Dr. Lee Gilbertson, a professor of criminal justice whose academic expertise he believed would be invaluable to the inquiry. Together, this unlikely trio embarked on a quest to uncover the truth, a quest that would lead them down a dark and disturbing path. As Gannon, Darte, and Gilbertson began to compile and analyze data from various jurisdictions, a chilling pattern began to emerge. They identified a total of 45 distinct cases, spanning several years, in which young men had died under remarkably similar circumstances to those of Patrick McNeil and Lawrence Andrews. The pattern was unsettlingly consistent. The young men, typically after an evening of socializing and consuming alcohol, would become unusually intoxicated, disappear shortly thereafter, and be found deceased in a body of water. The demographic profile of the victims also exhibited a disturbing consistency. The vast majority were Caucasian, and many were either college students or young professionals on track to pursue lucrative careers, often in fields such as engineering. This suggested that they were intelligent, ambitious, and had a great deal to look forward to in their lives. Their deaths, therefore, seemed particularly senseless and tragic. However, the most disturbing element of the pattern was the discovery of graffiti near the locations where the bodies of at least a dozen of the victims had been found. This graffiti took the form of a simple, yet unsettling image, a smiley face. This seemingly innocuous symbol, repeated with chilling regularity, became a key element in the investigators' emerging theory. Based on their findings, Gannon, Darte, and Gilbertson developed what became known as the smiley face murder theory. This theory posited that the 45 deaths they had identified, and potentially many others that had occurred between the 1990s and the 2000s, were not accidental drownings, as they had been officially classified. Instead, the investigators believed that these deaths were the result of deliberate homicides, committed either by a single, highly organized and deranged individual, or by a group of serial killers operating in a coordinated fashion. The smiley face graffiti, according to this theory, served as a kind of macabre signature, a calling card left by the perpetrators to mark their victims, and perhaps even to taunt law enforcement. The investigators argued that this theory was the only logical explanation that could adequately account for the numerous anomalies and striking similarities observed across the cases. The unusual condition of the bodies, the indications of possible restraint, the shared demographic characteristics of the victims, and the presence of the smiley face graffiti all pointed, in their view, to a darker and more sinister reality than accidental drowning. However, the smiley face murder theory has not been universally accepted. It is met with skepticism and even outright dismissal from some quarters. One prominent critic is criminal profiler Pat Brown, who has publicly labeled the theory as ludicrous. Brown argues that the attempt to link the smiley face, a symbol she describes as ubiquitous and commonplace, to a series of murders is inherently flawed. She contends that smiley faces are so prevalent in urban environments that their presence near a crime scene is more likely to be a coincidence than a deliberate marker. "It's not an unusual symbol," she stated. "If you look in any area 5 miles square, I bet you could find a smiley face." FBI has also weighed in on the matter, and their assessment has further undermined the credibility of the smiley face murder theory. In an official statement, the FBI acknowledged that they had reviewed the information provided by Gannon and Dart, and that they had interviewed an individual who had offered information to the detectives. However, the FBI concluded that their investigation had not yielded any evidence to support the existence of links between the deaths, nor had they found any basis for the claim that the deaths were the work of a serial killer or killers. The FBI's statement emphasized that the vast majority of the cases appeared to be the result of alcohol-related drownings, suggesting that the victims had accidentally drowned after becoming incapacitated by alcohol. Despite these significant setbacks and the skepticism of prominent figures and law enforcement agencies, Gannon, Darte, and Gilbertson have remained steadfast in their belief in the smiley face murder theory. They continue to pursue their investigation, meticulously gathering and analyzing data in an effort to uncover additional evidence that will support their observations and validate their conclusions. They are driven by a sense of justice for the victims and a desire to bring closure to their families. If their hunch proves to be correct, it would mean that one of the most elusive and dangerous serial killers, or groups of serial killers, in American history is still at large today, operating undetected and continuing to prey on unsuspecting young men. The implications of this are both chilling and profound, raising troubling questions about the nature of evil and the limits of our ability to detect and prevent it. The investigation continues, a race against time to uncover the truth before more lives are lost.